Today we mourn a great loss on our nation. About a week ago, my Barbie as the Princess and the Pauper video was blocked. Mattel relented when I first posted the video, and then as it was going through copyright blocks, they blocked it. It's fair use. Mattel, if you are watching this, I think we all want the Barbie Cinematic Universe video back in our lives. It was the start of what could have been something great, but we are here to mourn the Barbie video, lost in its heyday, but we are also here to celebrate. There are 101 of you! 2 days ago, I got an email saying that there were 100 of you, and I was super psyched. Thank you for watching my silly little video essays that started out as college finals and have now evolved into me trying to do this once a month. I have work today. I want to go to work. Okay, I am back from work, and it's also 3 months later, and I don't work there anymore. So it's been 9 months since that last clip. I have moved many different times. I've been all over the place. I've actually filmed many different videos intending to go after that clip and then never finished editing them. So I wanted to talk about there's this thing that I really love. I love music and albums that tell a story. I'm often a little bit frustrated because I'll be listening to something and I'm like, wow, this sounds really pretty. And there's a line in this that connects and resonates with me so deeply. And I want to know the meaning behind it. And then I dig in deeper and I find out that not just the song has a very interesting story and meaning behind it, but the entire album tells the story of a person or concept or something. I think an aspect about some albums that tell stories is that there is no other way you could tell that story. The album is the best way to tell the story. The music is the best way to tell the story. It wouldn't hit the same in a movie or in a short story. I'm gonna take this video and this time to talk about 3 albums that tell a story, and I'm gonna tell you the story and some of my own thoughts and personal connections with it, but there will not be a ton of analysis. And full disclosure, the last album we'll be talking about is the album that I just released because I had this whole story behind it and all of these interesting concepts within it, and I think the best way to explain that was through the music. However, sometimes I'll tell someone like, oh, I just released an album. They'll be like, oh yeah, I listened to it. I really enjoyed it. And I'm like, great. It's actually about my grandfather and his life and death. And they're like, wait a second. I did not get that the first go around. I want to re-listen to it. I think that examining some of these albums will just be a fun little adventure. So if you know of an album like that, please leave a comment. We can talk about this again. So the first album I want to talk about is Gone Now by the Bleachers. The guy who wrote this, Jack Antonoff, he produces Taylor Swift's music now, but he was in a band, or he was a band, I don't really know, called the Bleachers. They have some bangers. This album is the album that Don't Take the Money is on, which is kind of like the big song from that album. And he has a series of videos on YouTube where he spends like 30 seconds talking about each song on the album and what it means. So I will be stealing some information from that. This album is pretty simple. It talks about someone in a dream, someone waking up from that dream, living out their life, and then essentially going back to sleep. That was how I always viewed it, but I believe the phrase he uses in the album, waking up, living your life, and then kind of dying. And that's actually what he says the cover art is about. If he was dead and you put his photo on a mantle, that would be the photo. He would be regal, he would be in black and white. The first song on the album is The Dream of Mickey Mantle. The dream of going to sleep, being in the in-between, being between life and death, being between dream and awake. This song is the dream that we start with. We get some key motifs that appear on the album. There's a recording of his girlfriend in the hospital. He and his girlfriend are talking in the hospital, and that recording appears a lot. That's another motif on the album. And in this song, she says, I want to be grateful. And she's talking about life, and she wants to go home, and I want to be grateful. Jack has a line about the first few lines in the song are, I miss those days, so I sang Don't Take the Money song, which those are both songs on this album. The next song on the album is Good Morning, and it's kind of like we've woken up from the dream. We only have these lasting impressions of what happened in the dream. The first few seconds of the song are actually the last few seconds of the Dream of Mickey Mantle. So we kind of get this feeling of being pushed into the day and into the morning. Just like how in The Dream of Mickey Mantle, we have a few lines of woke up, I'm in the in-between, honey. First line in Good Morning is woke up, I'm in the in-between, honey. 1 foot out and I know the weight is coming. We had that dream and that processing, and now it's the morning and we actually are putting our foot out the door and going out into the world. I think the 2 most interesting points on the song are Let's Get Married, which he says is actually about his feelings after Trump was elected. He describes it as he feels very connected with Middle America. He tours in all of these cities. Upon the election of Trump, he now feels a little bit like, I thought I knew you. I thought we were on the same page. I'm not this elitist New Yorker. I know you. Why did you? And he describes it as, let's just get married. I want to grab everything and stay right here. I want to commit. He describes Foreign Girls as the music video for Don't Take the Money kind of goes into this, but he talks about he uses the wrong word, but he describes it as a little bit of fantasy of falling in love with someone who doesn't speak your language and they don't know you, they don't know the things that you've done in the past and you can't explain it to them. And so you can only tell them things that you can show them. So you don't have to go and confess all the things you've done in your past. You can only show them who you are in this moment. That is, I think, one of my favorite songs on the album because it brings in all of these motifs and these thesis statements and these things we've been muddling over in our day and in our life as we've been going through the album. Foreign Girls, the song is a little bit like the space in between awake and sleep, just like how the dream of Mickey Mantle was the space in between being in a dream and waking up. And he says goodbye to the friends I had, goodbye to my upstairs neighbor, and to the dream downstairs and anyone who lent me a favor. And he says goodbye to all these things and these people that we've had throughout the album, especially in Good Morning, where he says the same thing. Good morning, to my upstairs neighbor. I've been walking circles, lost on Sunday morning, trying to find my way back home, because I know I've been a stranger lately. That is what this album is about. That's kind of gone now. It doesn't really tell a narrative, not a specific narrative with characters or anything like that, but it does have a lot of these motifs that keep coming back, a very unique sound. To this day, I still don't really know what some of those motifs are, and I think that's what keeps it so alluring to me. I'm sure when he says the good morning to my upstairs neighbor, I'm sure he's just talking about like the people literally around him, creating that sort of New York environment where everyone's close-knit. It's almost that let's get married statement. But to me, I'm always like, who is that? Who's living upstairs? And every time I listen to the album, I keep questioning that, and it always comes back into play. Transitioning on to something that has a more narrative-based story within the album, I want to talk about Margaret by Jason Webley and Friends. So I learned about this album through Welcome to Night Vale, of course. That's how I find all new music, is through Welcome to Night Vale. Pyramid, the 13th song on the album, is featured in one of the episodes of Welcome to Night Vale, and it really stuck with me. It was a very haunting song, and Jason Webley has performed on Welcome to Night Vale before, and I always thought he had such interesting music, even if there was a song that I didn't particularly like or it didn't resonate with me as much. I always thought he had an interesting sound, and Pyramid absolutely tore me to shreds. I always wondered what it was about, and I wanted to go see what it was about, so I found the album that it was on, Margaret. And this is a story within a story within a story within a story. So the story basically goes, so Jason has a friend. His friend is named Chicken John. Yes, that is his real name. And he's a bit of a character. And Chicken John, at the time of writing this, they wrote this in 2013, 10 years ago, so in 2003, living in Portland or Seattle or something like that. I always get the cities confused. And he had a van full of trash from some show or some event that he had been working on. He was a traveling musician living out of his van, and he just needed to get this trash out of his van. And so he found a dumpster, and he was like, whatever, I just need to dump this trash. Turns out the dumpster that he finds is full, and it's full of the most beautiful antique furniture. And he's like, sick, let's just do a little swatch and I can sell this furniture and maybe make a quick buck. And so he switches the trash and the furniture. He's like trying to light a cigarette, and he can't light the cigarette in his car because his car is full, and he's like, whatever, I'm just gonna jump in like this dumpster and smoke my cigarette. It's so windy outside I can't even light the match. So he jumps in, and he finds at the bottom of this dumpster that something he had overlooked was a photo album. And it's the story of this woman's life, a woman named Margaret. She's lived the most depressing life. He's going through this book, and he learns she was born in a place called Everett, Washington. So the very month that she is born, a pyramid, an Aztecan pyramid, is being built in her hometown to honor her grandmother. It's being built by her father and her uncle. The town Everett, Washington, was kind of founded by Margaret's family, the Rucker family. So she kind of grows up in the shadow of this pyramid, and she kind of comes to this haunting realization that she's going to be buried there one day. And she doesn't want to stay there. She wants to get out. And so she goes to college, and she wants to be a poet. and she writes some poetry and she gets some of it published. In this scrapbook, there are copies of her poems that she's written. One of the poems is My Love Left Me in April, and it's also main song on the album. The poem goes, my love left me in April, when the world was young and new. My love left me in the springtime when my heart was young and true. Had I lost him in the summer when I was harvesting grain, had I lost him in the autumn when my heart was gray as rain, had he left me old in the winter, my heart would know less pain, but my love left me in April, and I shan't know love again. So Margaret continues, she marries a sailor and they move to Burbank, California, and she is pregnant and she's in her 9th trimester and she gets in a devastating car crash where she ends up in the ICU, and like there are photos of her from that scrapbook of her in the hospital, and her son is born a week later and he lives for less than a day. Her son is buried in the pyramid in Everett, Washington. She has 2 other children in her life. She never publishes any more poetry. One day, her husband and her sit down for some afternoon tea, and her husband pulls out a gun and shoots himself in front of her. Ironically, it's in April, so that poem was tragically a little bit foreshadowing in some weird, disturbing way. I believe about 10 years later, Margaret ends up committing suicide herself. She takes a bunch of sleeping pills. Her children are long grown at that point. She just lived a very sad life and she wound up back in that pyramid. So flashback to the modern era. Jason Webley is showing a friend around his hometown of Everett, Washington. He's showing her all of these like fun little hangouts that he used to inhabit. That she kind of turns to him and asks, who are the Ruckers? Like their names are on everything. And he's like, oh, I don't, they're just one of those names. I don't know who they are. But there is something else that's really cool in this town that has the Rucker name on it. And so he takes her to the graveyard and that giant Aztecan pyramid, and it has the name Rucker written across it. So they, do the time old tradition of like climbing up the pyramid and like sitting at the top, and they have a great time. And Jason goes to, he catches a flight down to California to go see Chick and John, his friend. They're catching up, they're talking about music, and then they end up talking about their everyday lives. Chick and John kind of goes like, hey, like I found something a long time ago that I think would really interest you. And so he drags Jason over to like this closet and he pulls out the scrapbook that he found. He says, I've kept this scrapbook for like 10 years because this woman's life resonated with me so deeply. She lived such a tragic life and I just couldn't bear to leave her life story at the bottom of a garbage bin. Like I couldn't do that. So I took her home with me and she's lived in my closet ever since. But I wish I could do something because this Margaret was such a beautiful person, and I feel like her story doesn't deserve to end with a bunch of furniture and a scrapbook and a garbage bin. And Jason kind of looks up at him and he says, I'm pretty sure I was at this woman's grave 24 hours ago. And that's kind of how this album got born. But the story of her life is just what I have told you. But the way that this album tells that story is absolutely fascinating. And I re-listen to it every April. Jason Webley, there are a lot of folk singers in the Pacific Northwest. He's, I would say, the forefront. He's what I know when I think of Pacific Northwest music. He takes her poem verbatim and he just puts it to his accordion music, which I know a lot of you are like, accordion music, they make fun of that in Garfield. It's a beautiful instrument. I swear to God, when it's played right, don't come for me. It was a giant show. I think they only did it once or twice. They toured a little bit around the Pacific Northwest, and then they did their last show in Everett, Washington, and they got the audience to go walk to Margaret's grave after the show, and they were all very respectful and they had a little vigil for her. My Love Left Me in April is the first song on the track. It's one of Margaret's poems, and I read it to you earlier. It has a very sad foreshadowing element to it because it kind of describes her life. Her love did leave her in April. The songs on this album that really hit with me the most, the last few songs on the album. So Firefly. It describes in some ways her relationship with her husband, which we don't know a ton about. Margaret had a garden full of fireflies. She herded them at dusk and dawn. Well, I love him so and he loves me, but his soul's grown tangled and far from free. His mind's been poisoned by man's war. He forgot what his body's for. Her husband was a sailor. He was in all of these wars that obviously left some sort of effect on him. The fireflies swarmed amongst themselves and made a terrifying swell. They said to Margaret they could help to dull the pain to quell, because we know of another world where your love could wait. painless and timeless for thee. This song at the end describes her deciding to commit suicide. Margaret sighed her well-worn sigh that could be best. She walked upstairs with a comet tail of fireflies into the room where Justice is her husband, Justice lays. She made the coffee, took his hand, said, "I'll see you soon in other lands, for you wouldn't need this world so full of pain, but for a while you pretend you do." The next song that really hits, in my opinion, is Possession Sound, which is, I believe, where they got married. And it describes her cleaning up the crime scene of her husband's death. Devastating. Soak up the blood from his carpet, wash what's left of his head, but who's going to tend to you, Margaret, now that your husband is dead? He took the gun from his pocket and saw to himself instead. Fare thee well, my angel. Fare thee well, they can't hurt you now. Just rest your head from whence we were wed in sweet possession sound.
Fare thee well, my angel.
Send my regrets to my father. Good night to George and John, those were their children. The rights were read and justice is dead and sweet possession sound.
This is editing Julia. The rights were read and justice is dead. I'm sorry, I know it's a little bit basic for me to be like, justice is a thing and it's also the name of her husband, but justice is a thing and it's also the name of her husband, and it's not fair that she had to clean up all of that. That's so unfair. Justice is dead in more than one ways.
Absolutely devastating. That is so horrifying, hearing a song about someone going through that. I feel like if you heard that song, you would be like, okay, I'm a little confused, but reading the lyrics and knowing the story behind it, it just hits so different. Every time I listen to this song, and I know the context, it's so differently devastating. Pyramid, the second to last song I'm going to talk about. Tell me, Margaret, who's coming down this river, you've been watching so much longer now than I. They started stacking up the stones the very day that you were born. No matter how you grew, they would tower above you. You could change your name, move all the way to sunny California, but when you start your life anew, does that long shadow follow you? Who was it, Margaret, that chose to resurrect you here for me in scattered lines of poetry? This distant, wistful girl I see reflected in your eyes. Forgive me, Margaret. All the ways I'm mistaken, all the liberties I've taken, I've projected you in costumes I don't think we're quite your size. He's talking about what he imagines her life to be. The fact that this pyramid was being built the very month that she was born, and she grew up in the shadow of it, this legacy, this knowledge that she will be buried in this Aztecan pyramid in Everett, Washington, no matter where she goes in the world. He realizes that he's projecting this girl. This woman is long dead, and she may not want to be resurrected. He's putting her in these costumes and puppeteering her ghost around, and the costumes don't even fit her. He's done all this research. He's traced these roads, drove past her home in Burbank, California, but you were not inside. You found a better place to hide. She's not there. He's obsessed with this woman in this scrapbook, and she's long gone. She's dead. She doesn't care. He asks her, when I'm gone, what will I want? To be left at the bottom of a garbage bin or dusted off and pulled up onto stage? Would it please me when someone lights a candle and says my name? And, you know, he's reflecting on, like, Chick and John have just left this woman and her life story and in this dumpster that he found her in. Was that where she was meant to stay? Does she want to be pulled up onto a literal stage and have her life performed and recounted in ways that are probably not even true? We don't know anything about this woman outside of, like, the few poems we can find from her college journals and the scrapbook that has her life story in it. The conclusion that Jason comes to is that will he say, leave me in my pyramid, blow out the flame and close the lid, the story's done, why don't we turn the page? Will he say, just leave me alone, leave me in my pyramid? And that leads us into song number 14 on the album, which is My Love Left Me in April, which is just My Love Left Me in April, the first song on the album, but done a little bit differently. It's a little bit more pizzazzy. The entire gang is here. They're all singing instead of just Jason singing. So everyone who is involved in the show is singing this song instead of just Jason. The last song on the album, I remember when I first heard it, I was like, whatever. But in the last few re-listens of Margaret, it's just been devastating. When the morning comes to me, I see the eyes of Margaret. When the morning comes around, and when she comes near me, I see the smiles of Margaret, and time rolls around. When darkness comes in me, I see a sign, the pen and the letter have faded. A promise is broken, a change in the tide, someone is singing her song. And when she's lonely, I'll take the hand of Margaret. I'll hold the hand of Margaret, and when she's around, and when she's troubled, I'll hear the cries of Margaret. I'll dry the eyes Eyes of Margaret. And it's this sort of concept that I feel like people have to deal with, where they learn about someone that they don't know and that is long dead, but died in such a way that you feel you want to pick up their soul and hold them and like cradle them and say like, I hear you now. I love you. I have heard your story. You are remembered. And it's a little disturbing because you're saying this to a stranger and you're projecting them in costumes that you don't think are quite their size. But at the same time, you can imagine that if you were in a sort of situation like that, you would want to be held and you would want to be told, I understand, in some weird way. I've always found that The Eyes of Margaret in some ways addresses that question that comes up in Pyramid of like, have I projected you? Is this not what you would have wanted? But it also says, as we end this entire album about this stranger that we don't know but have come to know in the scrapbook that we found, I love you and I hear you and I empathize with you and I care about you. And it's a really beautiful album, and it's got that unique quality where like they're not going to do another show, I don't think, just because it wouldn't be the same to do the show without any of these other artists, and they're all in different parts of the country, and it doesn't make sense to do it outside of Everett, Washington. With that being said, let's transition into my album. If I Don't Survive the Nuclear Winter was originally just, I was very obsessed, I think as we all were, with Chernobyl and the talk about what happens when a nuclear bomb goes off and stuff like that. It's something that has kind of, I think, plagued our generations ever since the first nuclear bomb went off. So I kind of thought that like, oh, you know, if I don't survive the nuclear winter, and I was like, oh, that's a cool thing, I should do something with that. The first song on the album, The Bomb, was a song I wrote for one of my music theory classes, and it was just a very simple, I liked the idea of like having like this song that danced between like, I think it was like C and C minor or something like that. I forget all the details, but I liked the idea of like this will they, won't they sort of thing with like, is this gonna happen? Is it not gonna happen? Because that's kind of what I think has plagued the conversation about nuclear attacks. It's always been this, is it gonna happen? Is it not gonna happen? We don't know. It's kind of horrifying. And so The Bomb is sort of that impending, like, run away, this is coming sort of thing. It's this warning song. It's the start of the end. And then we have Someone You Love, which is the next song on the album. The chorus of the song was actually one of the first things I ever wrote. I think I was about 14 or so. It described very succinctly in my mind a love I was going through, and it was that sort of like, you know, I just want to be with you. Like every letter, every line I write, everything could be yours if you love me. But I know that's not gonna happen. I know that's not real. The verses of the song are about, I think, watching my grandfather die. And it was that feeling of watching someone you love die, but it was a good death. A lot of the deaths in my life have been people ripped out of my arms and unable to say goodbye, not knowing my last words with them. This was a painful death, but it was a death where I was allowed to love them and I was allowed to say goodbye, and it was nice to have that, as painful as it was. But I wrote it from the perspective of my grandfather because he was kind of slipping away, and I could realize that he was there and he was thinking, but he wasn't really, you know, he was so out of it. I was wondering what he was thinking. I was thinking a lot about MCR's Cancer song when I wrote this, because they have that line, get me a glass of water, call my Aunt Marie, like I will not kiss you, because the hardest part of this. And I was thinking about a lot about that, and I was saying, if I was him, I would be saying, if something you hear sings that grateful silent chord, I had been singing to him a lot all night, just because I thought it would be comforting. And I thought a lot about, you know, if something you hear sings that grateful silent chord, that's me singing back, but I'm laying here and it's so boring and I'm floating on my back and I'm ready to leave. You're blurry in my eyes. His eyes were very blurry. You could kind of tell it was difficult for him to see. It was that sort of saying, I'm ready to go, so let me go. It's the beginning. I always viewed it as the beginning of a love at the end. And that was how I viewed it, between the chorus of the song, which was about a love that I had that never happened, and the verse of the song, which was about a love at the end of someone's life. Two very different kinds of love. He died of cancer, and so the will you break apart as you 235 decays was very much based around that. It was that sort of, as uranium decays in a nuclear reactor, are you gonna wither away like that? Then the ending of the song was very much that just repetition, that like crazed, obsessive sort of love of like, I know I want to be with you, that saying it 3 times, like wrapped around. And I had been singing the chorus of this song for 10 years just to myself. And it was that crazy love that you have sometimes. And then it was also, as you have to say goodbye to someone who's dying, that sort of not wanting to let go, even though you know you have to. Moving on from Someone You Love, which is a very sad song about saying goodbye to someone, we enter Cold War Man, which is very much the story about my grandfather as a child. And I always viewed it as a motivational sort of story, because this album is about my grandfather's life and death. That's at least how I viewed it. And it's a story within a story where the bomb and nuclear winter are bookends of a bomb impending, it's about to drop, and then nuclear winter is the bomb is dropped. Someone You Love is about the beginning of a love at the end of something, and Demise is about, well, we'll get to Demise, but these are kind of bookends, and then this is the story of my grandfather's life. So Cold War Man is about Billy Boy, and it's about him watching his father, who was a naval aviator, go off and fight in World War II. You know, the attack on Pearl Harbor happened, and he describes, watching his father run out the door and be like, I'm off to the military base, and, flying planes. And he looks at this and he watches his father and his brother go off, and they're a part of something. And he's in Inglewood in LA, and he's just climbing the hills, and he's being a kid, and he's watching soldiers practicing drills in the hills, which was something he described to me one time, because I asked him about growing up in Los Angeles during World War II. He described it as watching soldiers in the hills and watching his father go off to war. And his 10th birthday party was about going to the cowboy movies, and that was the best birthday he ever had. And I thought, wow, that really describes my granddad. He was just a cowboy kid. He wanted to be part of all of this stuff that was going on, and he viewed it in that way, in that idealistic sort of way, because he was just a few years too late to be a part of it. He went to college with all of these people who were coming back from World War II, and he was hearing about all these stories of them on ships and fighting and being a part of something. He wanted to be that, but at the same time, he can't be that, because if you have number one, this is where that cowboy kid mentality comes in, where it's a war. It was World War II. It was terrifying. It was insane. It should not have happened. We shouldn't have dropped a bomb. This is all horrible stuff that has to happen. But from a teenager's eyes in the 1940s, he thought it was just he was looking up to the greatest generation. And as a part of the silent generation, he wanted to be a part of something like that. But he can't really be a part of something like that ever again, because a war of that scale would mean nuclear annihilation. In my head, he vows to be the Cold War Man. He described to me one time, he said, did you know that Los Angeles was like London? And I was like, what? And he was like, yeah, they blacked everything out. It was because we were expecting the Imperial Army to bomb us. I was like, what? And he was like, yeah, they blacked out LA, and every night we would have a blackout, and it was, we were just waiting for the bombs. I was like, wow, I didn't know that. And so I kind of imagined him, out in LA, you see maybe 10 stars if you're lucky. And I'm sure it was different back then, but in my eyes, he's looking up at these stars at night, and he's scanning the sky for these planes, a little bit out of fear, but also a little bit out of fascination, because his dad is a naval aviator. Now that the war's gone cold, LA's lights are snapping on again, and he's saying, what am I gonna do? This all seems so far away, and how can I live up to the greatest generation who came before me as a part of the silent generation? So the deaths. So my grandfather lived a very interesting life. He commanded a nuclear submarine in the 1960s, and he described it to me once as the best years of his life were spent underwater. And I would ask him all these questions about what was it like to be, alive in the 1960s when all these pop culture things were happening and all of these other things. And he was like, I wasn't there for it. I was in the Sea of Japan spying on the Russians. And I was like, what? He was a crazy guy. He actually coined the term Crazy Ivan. That came from my grandfather. Flex. So he's avoiding detection from all these Russian submarines. He's creeping into the bay, and the end of the song describes how he was on this mission, and they had these men on the top of his submarine as they were rising in and out of the waters, and one of the men hadn't clipped himself onto the submarine properly, and he got washed out, and it was during monsoon season or something like that. So they rescued him, and he was fine, but he said that was the scariest moment of his career, and he was like, I almost lost a man, and I never lost a man on any of my missions. I was like, wow, that's terrible. terrifying. So a man swept out on rope, and then this keening sort of noise, which is kind of, I kind of stole from the Cranberries a little bit there. If you've seen the cover art for the album, the nuclear waste warning signs were definitely a big inspiration in this album. Nuclear waste warning signs I've actually read a lot about. It's a little bit different than, you know, nuclear war and nuclear winter. It's just, what do we do with nuclear waste is kind of the question about that. There's a really great report, and I actually reached out to some of the people in charge of the report just to make sure, like, you know, I could use the imagery, which the Department of Energy never called me back. I don't know what to tell you, but I assume they were really suspicious. They were like, why are you calling us? And I was like, I'm an artist. I'm just trying to do my thing. But no one ever got back to me, so I assume that it's okay to use that image. The whole point of this project is nuclear waste has a half-life of over 10,000 years, and how are we going to communicate these humans who are living 10,000 years in the future that these barrels of whatever in the Nevada desert should not be touched? They are dangerous, and they can kill you, and they can destroy an entire landscape permanently for generations. So how do we communicate that to future generations? Our written history is only 5,000 years old, and we still don't understand most of what the Egyptians were talking about. These nuclear waste warning signs are warning signs saying, this is not a place of honor. This space that you are looking at holds nuclear waste beneath it, and you should not investigate it. You should not unearth it. It is meant to stay here for at least 10,000 years until it will not permanently kill and poison humanity and the landscape around it. So in the background, it's the Someone You Love motifs. It's the every single letter I'll be yours forever motif in the background. It's that death march with the drums, but then it's also very, you know, xylophony in the background, and it's in some weird way childish, but it's also longing, and it's I don't know, I really like that song actually. And Water Lilies is one of the other big things that my grandfather did in his military career. Was he was a naval attaché at the Moscow embassy in the 19-whatevers in the Soviet Union. And my father actually grew up in the Soviet Union. He spent a lot of his high school years there. My grandfather, I went to go visit him in college one time. He was cleaning out his house, and he was doing that thing that people do before they die, where they kind of look around and they say, I want to get rid of some of this stuff, and I want to make it easier after I'm gone. He had this, you know, water damaged painting in the living room, and I was like, wow, this is really beautiful. What painting is this? My grandmother was kind of an art collector. He says, oh, you know, it's just some painting. I was going to throw it out. And I was like, oh, well, what's the story behind it? The story goes, Gran and Granddad were running from the KGB. They're trying to cut their tail, went around a corner, and they ducked into like an underground storefront. They were walking around this basement storefront, and it's wall to wall covered with paintings, and they're like these Jackson Pollock-y paintings, and they're very interesting, and they're kind of trying to wait out the KGB chasing them. So my gran and granddad are looking around, and you know, the storefront owner is kind of this crazy Russian dude. You know, he's smoking a cigar, and he's like, you know, goes upstairs, he yells at this guy for a little bit, he comes back down, he says, what can I do for you? And my gran looks around, she says, you know, all of these are so beautiful, but where do you get the paint? The way you're painting takes up so much paint, like how do you afford this? And he says, there's car factory across the street. At night, I hop fence, I steal paint, I paint. Do you want to buy painting? And so my gran bought the painting. It's called Water Lilies. I remember looking at my grandfather and being like, water lilies? And he was like, yeah, look. He showed me the painting, he said, look. And there were all these, I could see in this light blue paint, these water lilies. And I was like, oh my gosh. And he was like, that was my reaction when I first saw the painting. That's kind of what the song was about. It was literally that story. It was about him. You know, he's living his life into his prime. He's doing the thing that he always wanted. He's working at the station. You know, cowboy kids keep coming to the show. The Iron Curtain's coming down any day. Like, you know, he's lived his life. He's been a part of this thing. This is going to end soon. So, like, the pilot still leaves him in his dreams. Like, the pilot is this recurring character in the Cold War man story, and he's someone that he's trying to live up to, but he also feels like he can never live up to him. Funny little thing of like, I know you are. Like, my granddad will say like spy. He always hated the word spy because it implied betraying your country or something like that. What he really was like he was an intelligence officer or something like that. There was this fun thing that my granddad would always talk about, which was like, you know, we think of spies as like secrets and, you know, all this stuff, but the reality for him was that everyone knew what was going on. It just couldn't be said so explicitly. I know what you're doing here. I know you're listening to me on the phone. I know you're tailing me. Vice versa, you know, the KGB were like, I know why you're not really an attaché. Like, you're here for other reasons. The second half of the song is the story of the Water Lilies painting. It's but I always thought I was really obsessed with Rainbow Kitten's surprise song. It's called Free Fall. The conversation about like the devil within that. And so it was like running from Ivan being the Russians, just like it was mentioned in the depths, into Hades below, and the devil here was thriving on a box of Bordeaux. which I always thought was such a bad line, and swore I was gonna change it because I didn't like it, but it's kind of funny. I like it. And then the next song, House of Glass, is the end of the Cold War man story. It's the death of my grandfather. House of Glass was a little bit, I knew I wanted to tell a story about this house that he lived in because my grandmother was great at interior design and she loved art history, and that was what she went to school for. And it, you know, every time they went somewhere, she bought furniture in China, and like all the furniture I grew up with in my house was Chinese furniture because she bought it all in the 1950s, post-war China, and like, you know, it's just this beautiful hand-carved furniture. And she was a great shopper. My granddad always said she had a black belt in shopping. So it was a lot about walking through this beautiful house that was like almost like a museum from all of these places they had been and these things that they had acquired over the years, and this, you know, this artwork that my grandmother had collected. I could tell that my grandfather was kind of like, what's going to happen to all of this? And it was a little bit like he was asking, what's going to happen to my life after all of this? Like, how am I going to be remembered? What's this legacy of mine going to be like? And so I remember in the moments after he had died, I was walking around and I was like, oh, this is this wallet that, like, you know, I would see him, you know, put, where's my wallet? It's not his anymore in some weird way. These shoes, they don't have feet to go on anymore. He had been given a bottle of scotch as a gift, and he wasn't that big a drinker. And so he was like, you know, oh, you know, when I'm gone, you guys will have to drink this. I was kind of like reflecting on all of those things. This handwriting on the kitchen table there was no need for him to have that note anymore. And it was a little heartbreaking. I was looking back on his life and how within 10 years, he lost his own mother, he lost his wife, and then he lost my father. That must have been completely devastating. And it was this eternal question of like, will you see me when I'm not here in this house? Will you see me in all of these things? Will you see me in this life that I've lived and acquired? And it was so cold in his house because we'd been heating it. It was December when he died, and so when he died, we had no need to heat the house anymore, and so we just turned off the heat, and it was so cold all of a sudden. It was weird because I could see his reflection and everything, and all of these panes of glass. And it was eerie because I vaguely remember my grandmother dying from cancer. She had died in that same room, and it was weird to be sitting in that room without any of the furniture in it, having that echo of the past there, then realizing that the next person I was likely to see die would be my own mother. That was devastating. I kind of got to this point where I realized he was asking this question. He was looking back on his own father, and then my uncle he's also a pilot, and so I thought that was a fun mirror symmetry. And there's this thing of like, you know, my father, the pilot, like, have I lived up to my greatest generation, and then have I lived up to my own children's expectations of me, and am I someone you love? And I always thought that was something where we were similar in that way, where we were kind of continually asking, like, am I loved? I always thought that was such a human thing to do. Am I a man? Did I become this Cold War man? And then the response, which was me, who I always view the protagonist of the album as the singer of Someone You Love and Demise, which is me. And then my grandfather is in the middle. But I get a part on this song where I say, in his violet eyes, calling back to the Cold War man, in his violet eyes, I see someone I love. And it's that insistence, like, no, I love you, and I love you because you're a cowboy kid, not because you're a Cold War man. I love you because we celebrate Christmas together, we watch TV, we listen to opera together, and I love you because you're a cowboy kid and you're mischievous and you laugh, and not because you're this man. And so that was what that song was about. Demise is the end of the album. Everything is over, the bomb is about to come, things are about to end very permanently in a way that is kind of unknown, and in the same way that my grandfather, everything is going to end. You know, this life that I used to have, this childhood is definitely over. There are no vestiges of it left anymore. This life that I once had. I always thought in Demise, it would be kind of, you know, what would happen if I was, you know, if I got the alert, like, you know, bomb's coming, you got 5 minutes, you're the epicenter, there's no getting away from it, sucks to be you. Like, what would that look like? And I always kind of delusionally imagined that people would just be out on the streets, like, talking and being like, all right. So I kind of imagined going out onto the streets, finding someone and just being like, let's just dance. Like, let's just have a moment. I never got to love someone, so let's just say I love you, and let's just dance, and let's just have this moment. You know, I call back to a lot of songs in this, like Mama Said to Wait for Love. I love The Supremes, and Now the World Caves In, which is another song about nuclear annihilation, essentially. So it's kind of the end of something, the beginning of something at the end. And it's that same love song, but it's with someone we've lost one of our loves, and now we're meeting our true love. And then Nuclear Winter is, I didn't know what it was going to sound like, and then the night before I needed to have all of the files done, I like finally figured it out and I wrote it. I always knew it was going to be like these motifs, and so I wanted to have campfire quality sound to it and the wind in the distance, and then this sort of what a nuclear winter would look like. This cold and this, you know, buildings and annihilation, and then we get to, you know, that lines, if someone you love says goodbye, like, you know, we have that little motif, and then we go straight into the bomb, the warning song, almost reflecting around this campfire what happened, how we got to this place. Still the looming threat of the bomb and its effects and its everything. That motif ends and we go back into the every single letter, which was just that obsession I found myself in, that continual spiral of just, if every single letter, I will love you, every single letter, you know, and just saying that over and over again in the same way that the chorus is repeated over and over again in Someone You Love. And then we finally break free of that and we get this, I've called it the nuclear winter motif, but it's like it's this clear sound, it's this crystal sound, and we're free. Yeah, things are a little bit hollow and empty and desolate, but we're free, we made it. And that's the end of the album. So it's this weird story about, like, you know, life and love and loss, and the story of my grandfather's life and death, but also the story of like some tragic romances that I've had. And it's the story of nuclear waste warning signs and atomic annihilation and nuclear winter, and it's interesting, and it's somehow the only way I've been able to tell this story. I don't think I could tell it in another way besides just verbatim saying the story to you like this, which is what this ended up being, and I think I needed this. So I really like albums that tell these kinds of stories, even if there's something simple like Gone Now, where it's just a guy wakes up and then he goes back to sleep and there's all these fun little motifs in the middle and all of these songs with really interesting meanings, like Let's Get Married, which has a meaning that is very different than what you would expect it to be, or something like Margaret, where there's a story within a story. Actually, I think all of these albums are stories within stories. Margaret has the story of like this, you know, these people trying to imagine what this person who lived this tragic life would really think about them trying to tell other people about her life. Or something like Nuclear Winter, which I believe has a more narrative aspect, but that's just because I'm a screenwriter and I don't know how to do anything without a narrative. So I really like albums like this. So if you know of any, please tell me about them, because I would love to just talk about them, even if I don't have a grand point at the end. Especially because it's difficult to find the story behind those albums or songs without someone telling you about it. All right, please listen to my music. It's out on all platforms. All right, bye.